Hello, welcome to your live lecture, Thinking and Intelligence. For those of you watching the video, thank you. For those of you who are already here, don't forget you can add something to the chat. I'm Meredith Brown, I'm your instructor, and here we go. Thinking and Intelligence. So chapter 7 is all about how we think, and also we're going to talk about intelligence. So I put a picture of Candy Crush because I still play Candy Crush. I probably haven't played it in about 4 months, just because I hit a wall and I'm not going to pay for it. So, but Candy Crush, you have to use your thinking and intelligence of how things are going to be maneuvered, how you're going to get the levels resolved. So that is why it's here. It's a game that I play. I like it. So let's jump in. Cognition. It's what you think. Literally, cognition means thinking. Okay. So when we start talking about cognition, cognitive psychology in itself as a field is dedicated to examining how people think. It attempts to explain how and why we do the things we do. It studies the interaction amongst human thinking, emotion, creativity, language, and problem solving. Like, for example, is there an interaction between emotion and thinking? When we are in an emotional state, do we think differently? Do we make different choices? With language and problem solving, if we don't understand the language of the directions that we're being given, now not so specifically as if someone's giving us directions in French and we don't speak French, but I mean as in like if somebody tells me the widget needs to go in the affer mechanic and I'm like, I don't know what a widget is or an affer mechanic, I'm not going to be able to solve that problem because I don't know the language, I don't know the terminology. So that can affect how we think. So cognitive psychology is studying those interactions. First thing about thinking is we have concepts and prototypes. A concept is a category or groupings of linguistic information, images, ideas, or memories. Big ideas that are generated by observing details. Concepts can be very broad, like world history, for example, or very personal, like your birthday traditions, what you do during your birthday. So if I say, what's your concept of a vehicle? Probably the concept you're going to have is the vehicle that you drive or that you have or that you own. A prototype, however, is the best example or representation of a concept. For example, a sparrow is a prototypical bird, not an ostrich. So if you say, ask 100 people to name a bird, you're going to have very few people that are saying ostrich as a prototype. Also, if I say, what do you think of when I say I saw a dog? Not really enough details to make a conclusion, but if you're going to make a bet, if I said I saw someone walking a dog, if you're going to make a bet, you're going to statistically go with the most popular dog. So probably throw out there something like Golden Retriever or Labradors. So the prototype dog currently, it used to be the prototype was Golden Retriever because of Lassie back in the days. But now the prototype dog that people are mostly a go-to are Labradors. So now your natural concept. Now natural concept is concepts that created naturally through your experience. They can be developed either directly or indirectly. So you know snow because maybe you experienced it. You've seen snow. You've been in the snow. But you can also have a natural concept of snow if you've seen it on TV or movies, okay? So these are just concepts that you get because you see them, you experience them. Artificial concepts are concepts that are defined by a specific set of characteristics. For example, a triangle has 3 sides and 3 angles. A square has, and I know it says 3, but it actually has 4 equal sides. 4 equal sides and 4 right angles. Okay? And that's an artificial concept. A schemata. All right. So when we talk about schema, we'll also talk about schema with Piaget. We're going to talk a good bit about schema when we talk about memory. But a schema is a mental construct consisting of a cluster of collections of related concepts. So schemata are the method of organizing information that allows the brain to work more efficiently. You have a schema of what it's going to be like to go into a convenience store. You're not going to grab a buggy and, walk around and browse the aisles and chat with the people. No, you're going to go in there, get your stuff, get out. It's kind of the schema of how a convenience store works or a gas station. So a role schema, this is where we make assumptions about how individuals in certain roles will behave. For example, police officers or library. I mean, think about when you walk into a library and there's somebody sitting there. And when you walk in, you don't expect them to go, "Hey, how you doing? What's going on? Great to have you at the library." You know, they're not going to be all yelling at you from across the hall. You're going to get all the way in, and your schema is that your expectation is that they're going to be very quiet until you speak to them first, and they'll go, "Yes, can I help you?" They're going to be very quiet. That's kind of your role schema. That's a role that a librarian has. Okay? An event schema or a cognitive script. This is a set of behaviors that can feel like a routine, but it can vary by culture. Okay? So a script for a fast food restaurant versus a fine dining restaurant. So for example, fast food restaurant. I am not going to get into a cocktail dress with fancy shoes and my hair all done up because I've been asked out on a date and I'm going to be meeting them at McDonald's. Okay, I am going to wear jeans and probably a comfy t-shirt. Fine dining, however, I'm going to dress a different way. If I'm going to a fine dining restaurant and I know it's going to be a sit down, it's going to be 5 courses. Sometimes even certain things are required when fine dining. For example, with men, in some fine dining restaurants, they actually have jackets and ties that are hanging for men to put on their jackets when they borrow a jacket when they get to the restaurant if they don't bring their own. So we have a schema or a cognitive script of how things are supposed to go. And we develop that through our experiences. Another great example of a script, if I tell you I'm going to a fair. Now, a fair, if I say I'm going to a county fair, we have expectations of what are going to be there. Expectations of there's going to be carnival rides, there's going to be a few carnival rides, there's going to be livestock probably, there's going to be a cakewalk somewhere for donations. So we kind of have that schema or that script of what that's going to look like. All right, so moving in from that, let's talk a little bit about language. Language is a communication system that uses words and systematic rules to transmit information from one individual to another. Components of language. You have a lexicon, for example. A lexicon is words of a given language, so basically the vocabulary, like all the words involved in the language. Then you have grammar. This is a set of rules that are used to convey meaning. Okay, so we have grammar rules. We'll talk a little bit about that in a moment as well. So things like I went to the store instead of I go to the store. It's a grammar rule. The word went is the past tense of going. We don't say goed. All right. A phoneme. This is a basic unit or sound given to a language. Different languages have different phonemes. And what's really interesting about this is within 1 year, you lose the ability to do certain phonemes. Okay. So in that first year, you have babies make all kind of really weird noises. And those weird noises are phonemes that they could potentially be using for their language. This is one of the reasons why individuals in certain Asian cultures are not, like the word R is very hard for them because they've lost that that ability to say It's a phoneme that they never used when they were a baby. They didn't hear when they were younger. And so they lose that ability to make that sound or that phoneme sound. And that's also why it's very hard to learn certain languages if you are trying to learn different languages that have phonemes that you were not exposed to when you were a child. All right, morphemes. Morphemes are the smallest unit of language that are used to convey some type of meaning. I is a phoneme and a morpheme because it's just a sound, but it's also a morpheme because it implies self. Okay, also things like if a kid goes ball, well, that probably means I'd like to have the ball or more. Okay, small units of language that convey a meaning. Okay. So let's talk about the components of language. The components of language, you have your semantics. This is process by which we derive meaning from morphemes and words. So semantics is the meaning of the words. So, for example, if somebody says, I had an awesome day, I had an awesome time at the beach. Well, we're going to derive that they had a really good time. They had a really great time. Okay. Which is why you get into the sarcasm when somebody goes, oh yeah, I had an awesome day at the beach. It's like, okay, well, you said it with the inflection to imply, that you didn't have an awesome day, but you use the word awesome, and awesome means great or grand. So, so with semantics, people will literally argue semantics because people will throw words out there that don't mean really what they're trying to say. So it's kind of hard to understand what they're trying to say, because it's like, I'm trying to derive meaning from what you're saying, but what you're saying is not what you're meaning. And I usually show the little clip from The Princess Bride where you keep saying this word, but I don't think you mean what you think you mean. And that happens quite a bit. So the most recent example would be my daughter came in and she had broken a cup, and she had one piece in one hand, the other piece was in the other hand. And I said, you broke the cup. And she went, it's not broken. And looks right at me, and I was like, yeah, it's kind of broken. Like, I'm looking at it. It's kind of broken. But what she was meaning to say is she can fix it. Like, I can fix it. But that's not what she said. So it was like, okay, dude, I'm looking at it. So with semantics, words really do matter in how you use them and how you say them, because it can really derive meaning, especially in a text world. I mean, when you're doing all the texting and things. All right, syntax. This is the way the words are organized into sentences. Different languages use different syntaxes. So, for example, in Spanish, if they were to say, I have a red ball, it would be, I have a ball of red. So it wouldn't be, it's not in the same type of organization. So that's why Google Translate sometimes really messes up translations. So you got to be careful with the whole cut paste into Google when you're trying to do your homework. Just study. It's worth it to learn another language, I promise. All right. Next, so semantics and syntax are used to construct language. All right, so language development. How do we develop our language? Well, B.F. Skinner believed that language was purely learned through reinforcement. So if a child went nah, 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 nah when they're reaching for milk, that became the name of milk. Milk was now called nah, 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 nah. So, because they were then given the milk. But that doesn't really explain how people pick up or learn language when there's no reinforcement there for them. Chomsky discovered and brought forth the theory of the language acquisition device. He believed that learning is biologically determined, biological predisposition and critical period for learning language. So you have that critical period for where you have to learn the language, and you will learn a type of language. We find with twins, baby twins, they're communicating with each other. They're just using their own kind of language, which is mostly babbling with inflection. We don't understand them, but they're clearly having a conversation. Quite often in class, I'll show a little video of twins talking to each other, baby twins talking to each other. So you should YouTube that. It's really super cute. All right, newborns have preference for mothers' voices and for videos where language and faces move in sync. So if you're in front of a baby, a young, maybe like a 2-month-old, and you say, hi, baby, but there's a different voice coming out of your mouth, so you're just moving your lips, and let's say the dad's voice is coming out, the baby's like, what's happening? This is like some sort of craziness. So they prefer the mother's voice, and they prefer when faces move in sync. 1-year-olds are only able to discriminate among phonemes used in languages in their environment. I already talked about that. So babbling stage. This is where babies are babbling. They're kind of getting their phonemes out. So not trying to communicate. Argument in the field is that babbling is just getting the words out there. They're not necessarily trying to have a conversation with you. They're mimicking you. Remember we talked earlier about the mirror effect, where they'll model a person making faces at them. Well, they do the same with language. So if you go ba 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 ba, they're gonna like try to make that facial expression with the lips and ba 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 ba. All right. First words between 12 months and 18 months. Now, overgeneralization. Overgeneralization is an extension of language rule where they use past forms of verb tenses are used. You see this a lot in young children. And you also see it in people that have kind of just grown up with that's the way we say it. My husband, for example, he still says he got sidetracked. And I was like, tracked is not a word. He's like, yes, it is. And so one day I heard his mother say it, and I'm like, okay, that's why he still says it. But sidetracked is not a word. It's sidetracked. Like tracked is not a word. But that's an overgeneralization or extension of the use of grammar. So when a little kid says something like, my mommy go to the store. I mean, that's good. They're learning grammar rules. So you don't just say to them, are you stupid? She didn't go to the store. She went to the store. Like, don't do that to them. Just say, oh, really? Your mom went to the store? That's wonderful. And that will slowly start to kind of correct that understanding of usage of grammatical rules. In the beginning, though, they will overgeneralize. So instead of saying mom went to the store, they'll say something like mom go to the store. Or they might say there's mouses in the house because they don't understand the rule of mouse. Multiple mouse, more than one mouse is going to be mice. All right, rules of language understood. Exceptions are still being learned all throughout life. I mean, you still find language exceptions even all the way up to me. I've still learned a few language exceptions in my older years as well. So Edward Sapir and Benjamin Wolfe, they believe that language determined thought. So basically how we think, we have to be able to think to be able to talk, okay? To be able to have language, access to language, okay? If language doesn't have terms for the past, you can't think about the past. Linguistic determinism, however, says that English, time is horizontal. So I am running behind schedule. Whereas in Mandarin Chinese, time is vertical. The past is up, the future is down. So you can see how this can really affect when you're translating something. So someone says, I'm running behind schedule. That doesn't translate directly as I'm going to be a little bit late in Chinese, or in Mandarin, excuse me, because time is vertical. It's not horizontal. So the deny, they only have 2 words for color, light and dark. Now, don't want to say, yeah, but there's so many colors. Yeah, there's lots of colors, but there's no necessity to have all of those colors. There's no reason to have, teal and opaque. Light and dark are the only ones that are necessary for their needs with regards to language. They can still distinguish all the colors, the same as an English speaker. They can still see that the colors are different, but there's no purpose to having all of the different names for all of the colors. So they don't have it. It's the Dani tribes. All right, so real quick, let me tell you about this too. So before we get into the next set. Also, snow. Okay. Oop, not smo. Snow. So if we just were to Google different types of snow in Alaska. Oops, this needs to move. All right, so if we look at Eskimo words for snow. So how many words can you think of for the word snow? Like I personally can think of sleet, powder, packed, loose, flake. Those are the 5 I know from living in Colorado. But Eskimos, let's check out some wiki. So we look here at their words for snow. Eskimo snow. That's an American band. That's weird. All right, hold on just a second. Let me do something different. This is why you never Google anyone. Names for snow. You don't Google in front of the class. 60 baby names. There we go. Farmer's Almanac. That's going to be a better one. Here we go. So how many words for snow? Well, here, oh, I could have thought of blizzard. All right, but you have barkhand. This is horse-shaped snowdrift. Blizzard. Corn snow. This coarse, granular, wet, form circles in the meetings and freezing. Then we got column, type of snowflake shaped. Crust. Dendrite snow. Finger drift. Fern. Flurry. I've heard of flurry. Grapple. Ground blizzard. Heard of ground blizzard. Wow, I don't remember some of these. Hominy snow? Huh. Lake effect snow. These are all the different types of snow. Okay, in the South, we have snow and we have sleet. That's pretty much it. And I don't really hear people using sleet. They say it's snowing when I'm like, it's not snowing, it's totally sleeting. But, you know, I've never heard anybody say it's hominy snow out there. So, interesting stuff. So when we start talking about languages and their use for their need for different words, we don't need 40 different words for snow in the South. We only need a few because we don't get that much snow. In fact, I don't even, if I were to tell somebody, yeah, I was in Colorado the other day and I got stuck on this small road because of a drift. Somebody's going to look at me and be like, what's a drift? Well, a drift is a snow drift. It's where the snow drifts over and makes this giant wall of snow. And sometimes, depending on where the wind's going, it decides it wants to just block a road. So, but they're not blocked for long. They got some serious snow equipment they get out there. But anyway, so snow's an interesting one when we start talking about the need for different words in a language. Snow is not really one that we need 20 different ways to say snow. All right, so let's get into problem solving. So problem solving strategies. First of all, a problem is merely a solving strategy is merely a plan of action used to find a solution. Different types of plan of action. There's trial and error. This is continue to try different solutions to solve a problem. If not, it's not very time efficient, but it's commonly used. So this is the whole concept of, you know, you've got round, square, triangle, and I'll make a star, even though it'll be not. Like, oh, there we go. Star. Okay, and then we got this peg, and we got this peg. Okay, we realize none of these are going to fit in those actual holes because, you know, I can't draw. But you take this one, you poke here, poke here, poke here, poke here. Yay, it goes right in there, okay? Take this one, you go try here. Oh, yay, it goes right in. You take this one, you try here, here. Yay, it goes in. You take this one, try here. Yay, it goes in. All right, that is trial and error. We're trying it to see if it works. Does it work? Yes, it worked. All right, we'll move forward, okay? Trial and error. An algorithm. This is step-by-step instructions that we utilize to get to an answer that will always be correct. Okay. So for example, there's a certain way that we have to solve a problem in math. We have to first do hold on. Here we go. We first have to do, I'm going to show you this picture for it. Right here. So when we talk about math, there's a thing called the order of operations. And here we go. All right, so the order of operations. We have brackets, okay? So anything inside of a bracket. 2 plus 3 to the second minus 5 times 1 plus, let's say, 2 equals, okay? All right, so I didn't have a division in there, but we can let that go. So this problem, for example, we're going to do brackets first. So we're going to do 2 plus 3 first, right? So 5 squared minus 5 multiplied by 1 plus 2 equals. All right, we just took care of that. Next is going to be orders of orders. So 5 times 2, or excuse me, 5 times 5 is 25, right? 25 minus 5 multiplied by 1 plus 2 equals. So then the next step we're going to do, because multiplication is next here, we don't subtract 25 from 5 and then go from there. Next step we're going to do is we're going to do 25 minus 5 times 1 is 5 plus 2 equals, okay? And the next step we do is we go from left to right. It's not necessarily addition, so it's just from left to right. So, because these can be kind of exchanged back and forth. So 25 minus 5 is 20 plus 2. So that's going to equal 22. All right? That's the order of operations that we follow. This is a formula, okay? This is a formula. This is a formula. The order of operations is a formula that we use to do math, to get the answer every single time correctly. Math is plugging things into a formula, step-by-step instructions. Also a recipe, step-by-step instructions. We need to have step-by-step instructions with a recipe, and in theory it will come out correct. But you got to watch out for altitude too, and oven working properly and all of that. So a little bit less guaranteed than a mathematical algorithm would be, but still the concept is the algorithm. So next is a heuristic. Heuristic is a general problem-solving framework. These are our mental shortcuts. Something, for example, is working backwards, trying to solve a problem by focusing on the end result, or breaking into large groups into series of smaller steps to get to a resolved answer. So here's some of the problems with problem solving. One is our mental sets. A mental set is persists in approaching a problem in a way that has worked in the past, but it might not work now. We say, well, this used to always work. But if it's not working, you need to change things up. Another one is functional fixedness. This cannot, we just cannot perceive an object as being used for something other than what it is designed for. A great video for you guys to watch on this, and I'll put it in the, let's see, hold on. A great video, well, you can just YouTube it. But if you go to YouTube and you type in Apollo 13 air filter, this is a really awesome way to see how they literally, so you guys can't hear this, but their air filter was broken, okay? So basically on the Apollo they said we have to take all the parts that are on the Apollo right now currently, and we have to teach the astronauts how to build a filter using the parts that they have access to. So they had to get out of that functional fixedness of going, okay, well, but the filter's round. The filter's round. We can't get anything to fit into a round filter because it's round. And they had to come up with a way to be able to help that. All right, next is anchoring bias. Now, anchoring bias, anchoring bias is basically when you tell somebody that you give them kind of like an anchor of a way to think. So things like businesses, they will use anchoring bias. For example, they may say something like, it's $530, but today only you can get it for $215. So you think you're getting this really great deal because they anchored you at what they believe the product is worth. Cars do it all the time. They say sticker price $29.5, right? But then they say, well, we can get you down to $27.250. And you're like, wow, man, I'm saving a lot of money there. Not really, because they anchored you here. I mean, the truth is you can get a $29,000 car probably down to about 21.5, depending upon the timing, if it's close to the end of the year, if the person is 2 cars away from getting their, $15,000 bonus at the end of the year, they'll be more than willing to sell it for you. So I got my $37,899 minivan. I walked off the lot with it for $26,500. So it can be done. I basically just said, well, okay, thank you for your time, and walked out. And I was on my way out. They said, well, come back, let's have a conversation. So when you anchor somebody into that, so if you say to somebody something like, oh, I got this pair of shoes I want to sell. I paid like $70 for them, but they don't fit me right. They don't feel good, and I want to get rid of them. But gosh, I paid $70 for them. I would like to get some of my money back. But I mean, I'll unload them for like $30 if I could find somebody to buy them. If you anchor somebody at that $70, they're going to be like, $30, wow, that's a great deal. They're going to think it's a great deal. Also, if you tell somebody the Mississippi River is about 5,000 feet long, and then you ask them to guess how long they think it is, they're going to guess something that's within the range of up in the thousands, maybe 3,000, maybe 5,800. So they're going to guess around there. If you tell them that it's only 500 miles long, they're going to keep it around under 1,000. And in actuality, I think it's 2,223. I mean, I could look that up. Yeah, I was close. It's 2,348. But I mean, try that. Ask one of your friends, say, hey, I'm trying to figure out how long the Mississippi River is. I know it's about 500. How long do you think it is? And then see what their answer is. Ask about 3 people using this. And then ask 3 other people, yeah, I'm trying to figure out how long the Mississippi River is. I think it's about 5,000. How long do you think it is? And then see what answers they say. It's really kind of cool because you'll see anchoring bias at work. Next is confirmation bias. This is focusing on information that confirms our existing belief. So, for example, if you think that, teenagers are rude, well, then you are going to be looking at every single time a teenager's rude. You're going to be like, I knew those teenagers were rude. Crotchety rude. That's an awful picture. I don't know why I tried. All right. So, but if you believe that teenagers are rude, you're going to have that bias. You're going to miss the fact that a teenager, held the door open for somebody. Another person, let somebody else in front of their line. And these were all teenagers. But that one teenager comes in and bumps into you. You're like, teenagers are all rude. All right. It's going to be that. You're wanting to confirm what you believe. So that's really all you see. You don't see outside of that. Hindsight bias. This is you believe an event was predictable, even though it really was not. A funny thing is, I did this with my husband, and he's in the house somewhere. He might even overhear me. But I would say to him, I'm going to go do this such and such quest or this such and such thing. And he'd say, well, you're not going to be able to do that by yourself. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And I'm fine, right? And I do it fine. And then and that happened multiple times. Well, one time he said, you're not going to be able to do it by yourself. And I failed. He's like, see, I told you couldn't do it by yourself. And I'm like, dude, what about the 5 times before that I did do it by myself? Like, I failed this time, but all these times you said I wouldn't. So that's like, it's hindsight bias. And I guess being a psych person, I notice this more than somebody would that's not, because someone will say something to me like, I knew it was going to rain today. It's like, did you really know it was going to rain today? Like, did you really know that? Or is it because it's raining you remember that you knew? The only really way to actually prove that you're getting things right is to write down. And when you say something like, oh, it's going to rain today, jot that down. Because I can promise you, if you say it's going to rain today and it doesn't rain, you don't go, I really thought it was going to rain today. I must have been wrong. We don't do that. We don't do that at all. We only confirm it when we're correct. So that's hindsight bias. You believe an event is predictable, even though it actually is not. And it is so incredibly common. People do it all the time. And you'll hear somebody say, I knew that guy was going to run that stop sign. No, you actually didn't. You didn't actually know. So, but it's hindsight bias. All right, representative bias. This is when we unintentionally stereotype someone or something with a physical disability or physical disability with mental acuity is an example of this. So unintentionally stereotype someone for something. So when we see an individual in a wheelchair, quite often people will assume there's also some kind of mental issue there as well. When there very well could not be. There probably is not. Somebody who is physically disabled doesn't automatically translate to mentally disabled. So this is a representative bias. We see something and we make a stereotype based on what's being represented to us. All right, ability heuristic. This is a decision made based on example, information, or recent experience that is already brought to mind. So when we talk about availability heuristic, media, for example, so a recent experience that is readily brought to mind. So if we have to make a decision and we think back on, well, I saw this show, or this one friend was telling me such and such, that availability to quickly pull it to our mind influences that decision that we make. All right, so any questions on that? Looking good? All right. Okay. So, and don't forget, you can always email your questions too. So, and you can unmute your mics if you like. All right, so going into intelligence. Charles Spearman, he came up with one general factor, G, which can be measured to compare between people. Your crystallized intelligence is intelligence, acquired knowledge for the ability to retrieve. In theory, it grows over a lifetime. Okay, so crystallized intelligence is one that as time goes, you acquire more and more and more and more and more knowledge. As long as you can get to it, it continues to grow. Fluid intelligence, however, is the ability to see complex relationships and solve problems. It peaks at about 25 and then it starts to kind of decrease. This is why when you have somebody who is older and it's like, here's a new piece of technology. Well, the technology doesn't seem complex to some, but as you age, things become more complex because you don't have the building blocks to be able to do the behavior. Like, I was just helping a colleague who has just had to go online. And she is like, I am completely like wigged out. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm trying to figure this out. And I was talking to her and I said, if you just kind of step out of being worried and just click stuff and figure it out that way, it will do you so much good. Like, just don't worry about breaking it. You're not going to break the internet. So, and that helped her tremendously. But I've been helping her to learn some of the programs that she's been kind of struggling with. So, and she's in her 60s. So, and she learned it. I just had to be very patient with her and help her a little bit because she didn't have all of the pre-knowledge of that particular software. All right, so more intelligence. Howard Gardner, he believed that we had multiple intelligence, okay? So at least 8 different types of intelligence. Example of that is emotional. Well, actually, let's not do this yet because these are actual different types of intelligence that have come out. So Gardner's multiple intelligence, you can, if you would like to look at all of them, they are in your textbook, but also a really great, that's what we need right there. That's funny. All right, so let me bring up Google. Hold on. We just did the Mississippi River. Hold on just a second. All right, so Howard Gardner's multiple. So Gardner's multiple intelligence. All right, let me show you this right here. So if we look at Gardner's multiple intelligence, you've got visual, spatial, musical, kinesthetic, body, interpersonal, linguistic, logical, naturalistic, interpersonal, and intrapersonal. So self-smart versus people-smart. Self-smart, knowing about yourself. So these are different types of intelligence. Howard Gardner argued that we all have different types of intelligence. But many people in the field argue that it's not different types of intelligence as much as it is talents in certain areas, because we find that individuals that are very good with music usually are pretty good with math as well. All right, so next, two other types of intelligence: emotional intelligence and cultural intelligence. So emotional intelligence is the ability to understand emotions and yourself and others, to show empathy, understanding social relationships and cues, and regulate your own emotions. This is a very strong quality to have, but again, people argue that it's not so much a type of intelligence itself, as much as it is a skill. But it can be argued to say, then how come some people are kind of just better at it in general? So next is cultural intelligence. This is known as how well you relate to the values of different cultures, how well you are able to relate to the values of different cultures. So different types of intelligence. So creativity. So we talk about creativity. This is the ability to generate or create, discover new ideas, solutions, and possibilities. Creative people typically have an intense knowledge about something, work on it for years, look at novel solutions, seek out advice and help from other experts, and they take risks more often than people who are not creative. Two different types of thinking, specifically in the world of creativity. We have divergent thinking and convergent thinking. So divergent thinking is thinking outside of the box. This is allowing an individual to arrive at unique and multiple solutions to a given problem, whereas convergent thinking is the ability to provide a correct or well-established answer to a solution to a problem. So divergent is thinking outside of the box. In fact, there's a movie called Divergent. Totally works for that, because, she thought outside of the box. She wasn't willing to take on one specific type of categorization. So how do we measure intelligence? Well, one way we started out was we have intelligent quotient. This is an IQ. Now, a really big key here is that IQ is not how much you know. IQ is the ability to learn, okay? So, to get an IQ score, it needs to be administered by a licensed psychologist or therapist, or I think counselors can do some of the testing, some of the IQ tests. But to do something like the WAIS or the WISC or the WIPSI, you're going to need somebody with a psychologist or a therapist who's trained in psychometrics. Like I could do some of the testing because I'm trained in psychometrics. Sir Francis Galton in the late 1800s developed the first test of intelligence. Then Alfred Binet came along in the 1900s and developed the first reliable intelligence test appointed by the government to identify children who may have difficulty in school. Louis Terman then came around, and he, Stanford professor, modified Binet's testing. That's why we have now the Stanford Binet. And standardized testing. He tested thousands of diverse age children so that the range scores resulted in a bell curve. This is the Stanford Binet intelligence scale. Okay. So we had thousands of people that we tested, and they kind of put the people on the scale, and they created a bell curve. That's not a very good bell curve. There we go. Better bell curve. All right. That's what a bell curve looks like. So standardization is a manner of administering scores and interpreting the results consistently. With IQ tests, you want to have standardization. You want things to be the same every time you do an IQ test, so that way you're not having different standards for different individuals. And then we have norming. This involves giving a test to a large population so that data can then be collected and compared to various groups, such as age groups. Norms are not expectations of what a given group should know, but a determination of what the group does know. So when we talk about norms, the normal IQ is going to be 100, okay? And kind of the standard deviation that we go by is 115. So 115, 75, and then going up from there, 130, and then 60. All right. So if you have an individual that falls into this category, this is low average. This is high average. But this is the normal. Okay, this is where about 65% of individuals fall somewhere in this category. If I was to guess, if you said, well, what's my intelligence? I would guess 100 because that's where the majority of the population falls, somewhere within that. Oops, this is 85. Excuse me. I thought that was wrong because I'm subtracting 15. So go my intelligence. All right, 85. And then 85 minus 15. That's going to be 70. I thought so because 70 IQ. So anyways, but 85 to 70, that's going to be borderline intellectual functioning. BIF, borderline intellectual functioning. And then 15 to 30, this is going to be high intelligence. And then anything above 130 is going to be considered, well, genius status, really. Genius status. For Mensa and some of the genius type groups, you have to test 135 or higher to be considered into their little club. But if you think about it, an individual who's below 70, and that's about 2% of the population, and above 130, these are geniuses, people 130 or higher. This is 2.5% of the population, about 2.5. And this up here, right here, these are about 14-ish. So when you think about it, most individuals fall between 85 and 115. And then you have one standard deviation from that. All right, so David Wechsler is a psychologist who spent years working through his career. World War I veterans developed an IQ test, combined several subjects from intelligence tests between 1880 and 1917. The Wechsler-Bellevue Intelligence Scale, the Wechsler. Later, this title was changed to the Wechsler Adult, which is the WAIS. This is the gold standard of intelligence testing, and that's what is used when you want to get the most accurate of IQ scores. All right, the Flynn effect. So what we have seen is each generation has had a significantly higher IQ than the last. There's a lot of different theories for this. They argue that IQ does not increase necessarily, increased IQ does not necessarily mean that younger generations are more intelligent. Part of it is, some of the argument is that the tests are kind of losing their integrity. People are teaching the tests. Also, a lot of the games that are online, like maze games and things like that, that's part of the WISC for kids. There's a WISC test for kids that's on the WISC. So they're actually doing some of the tests that they're practicing them practically. And again, I said that IQ is not what you know, but your ability to learn. So we are seeing higher IQ scores. But it's the Flynn effect. We're just seeing generations of higher. So there's a lot of speculation of why that's happening. So, all right. So again, the bell curve, which we just showed you over there. I guess I could have waited to hear. Oh, it's an awful bell curve. But let's say it looks even. So average of 100, standard deviation of 15. So this would be 85. This would be 115. And then we have 130. And then we have 70. Anything below 70, these individuals are going to need constant help. 70 to 85, they're going to have some ability to function on their own, but it would be a very hard struggle to get a college degree. High school is going to be a big struggle for them as well. Can get through high school with modified classes, things like that. 85 to 115, this is the average IQ. Remember, I have low average, high average. Okay, 15, this is going to be higher intelligence. This is going to be borderline intellectual functioning, kind of on the borderline of having issues. And then anything above 130 is going to be considered genius. To make this, we needed a representative sample, a subset of the population that accurately represents the general population. And then you have your standard deviations, which again, I just told you about that. It's 15 points. So intellectual disability, about 2.2% of the population has an IQ below 70. A score of 70 or below indicates significant cognitive delays, major deficits in adaptive behavior, functioning, and difficulty meeting community standards for personal independence and social responsibility. Formerly known as mental retardation, it's now looked at as an intellectual disability and has 4 subsets: mild, moderate, severe, and profound. Individuals that are found to be moderate, severe, and profound, they're going to need 24-hour, it was severe and profound, they're going to need 24-hour, but moderate, severe, and profound, they're going to not be living on their own at all. Mild, you may have somebody who can be on their own for certain amounts of time, but not completely self-sustained living. And this is different than learning disabilities, okay? This is IQ below 70. All right, gifted individuals are considered individuals have a score of 130 or higher, again, 2.2% of the population. 1921, Lewis Terman began a longitudinal study over 1,500 children with IQs of 135 or higher. These children became well-educated, successful adults, and were well-adjusted. Results showed that the subjects were above average in physical build and attractiveness, dispelled the earlier notion that highly intelligent people are weaklings. All right, so you don't have to be a geeky person to be intelligent, to have high intelligence. All right, so in some Minnesota twin studies, we had some twins that were reared apart, twins that were reared together. Research found that identical twins raised together and identical twins raised apart Researchers found that twins raised together and identical twins raised apart exhibit a higher correlation between their IQ scores than siblings or fraternal twins raised together. So what it's telling us is there is a genetic component to intelligence. Findings from these studies reveal genetic component to intelligence. However, it's not always possible to isolate how and when high intelligence is passed on to the next generation. So when we look at that particular study, we have what's called a range of reaction. This theory is that each person responds to an environment in a unique way based on their genetic makeup. Your genetic potential is a fixed quantity. So, for example, if you have somebody with an IQ intelligence of 100, or let's say we have an IQ intelligence of 115, they refuse to learn to read, and they refuse to read on their own, and they say, I hate school, I don't want to go to school, I'm done with this, I'm done, I'm not going to do this anymore. Well, they're going to pretty much either maybe slide back to like 100. They don't have that enriched environment, okay? They're not maintaining. So, by the time they're 18, 20, they're average. They're 100. That's fine. But if you have a kid that's, 100 and they don't have a stimulating environment when they're young and they slip down below that 85, now you're getting into some dangerous territory. So it's really important to, in the early years especially, to push to help kids have as much exposure as possible to help them with intelligence, as much exposure as possible to reading, to writing, to words, because what you want to do is if you have a kid, for example, that's sitting on the 85, you want to help them to push them to that 100 instead of 85 slipping down to that 70. So you want to do everything in your power to do that. Social structure also plays a part in high intelligence, and it varies among ethnic groups and socioeconomic status. Arthur Jensen tested among various groups. Students included IQ was determined by genetics. He also postulated that intelligence is made up of 2 types of abilities, rote memorization at level 1 and conceptual and analytical abilities at level 2. But one can be argued that that you can learn analytical skills and you can learn better ways to memorize. But again, it all starts very young. It's very good to push kids between 6 and 8 is a very critical time with regard, especially 3 and up is a critical time in helping build those base skills so that the child can be pushed into that higher bracket of intelligence. So learning disabilities. Learning disabilities, these are not the same as intellectual disabilities. You can have somebody sitting in an IQ of 138 and they can have a learning disability. Often they're not recognized as being intelligent because maybe the disability is making things appear as if they're not intelligent, but learning disability is considered specific neurological impairment rather than a global intellectual or development disability. Anywhere between 30 and 70% of individuals diagnosed with ADHD also have some sort of learning disability. I myself have dysgraphia, dyslexia, and dyscalculia. Words flip each other's backwards, and spelling is nearly impossible for me. I never learned to read things phonetically. It just didn't click. I see letters backwards, numbers backwards. So I just have to double check everything, triple check everything, especially if it's something important. And I've just kind of learned to do that. So, all right, dysgraphia. Dysgraphia is when children with dysgraphia have learning disabilities that results in a struggle to write legibly. So they have a hard time writing. They may also have problems with special abilities. Dyslexia is an inability to correctly process letters. So they have a difficulty understanding sound and letter correspondence. So, psychology, that's not how you say it. It's just psychology. That's a rough word for somebody who's dyslexic because it's like, but there's a PS, but they don't hear it phonetically. So reading, someone with dyslexia also, letters will flip places. So they may be in the middle of reading, and especially reading out loud, they may say, understanding sound, because they flip the D from the S. So those things can happen a good bit too, especially with writing. You got B and D. Come on. I was Meredith Down for a very long time. Meredith Drown instead of Brown. Cursive fixed that for me. All right. Well, guys, that's the end of the lecture. Thank you. Don't forget your exams are coming up soon. And if you have any questions, email me. Thank you for those of you who have come today. And I will stop this. And if there's any more questions after, which is usually when the questions hit, we'll get those. Thanks, guys. Stopping the recording now. And feel free to unmute your mics.